Finding problems, that's easy. They exist in every community. I'm Terry Springs, your host. We're looking deeper, and we are talking solutions, finding out how we all can make a difference. Now in Talking Solutions, opioid addiction, overdose. Welcome into the studio. Debi Nadler, you are with a group called TAM.
The Addict's mom, yes.
I can't wait to hear your story. Also, welcome back, Bob Vickrey with WestCare.
Thank you, Terry. Good to be back.
We got a lot of things to talk about. First of all, Debi, I know this started when you reached out to me with an email.
Yes.
Saying that you're trying to spread the word about TAM.
Correct.
How did you get so passionate about this group?
I actually just found the group haphazardly. I was on Facebook, and I had been dealing with my son's addiction for almost 8 years at that point. He had been in and out of addiction, and like a mother bear, I was never giving up hope. I knew it was a disease, and I was trying to do everything I could in my power to help him help himself. And I really had no support from my family, not that they didn't care. They loved my son, their brother, their grandchild. But it's very hard to understand the disease. I really had nobody to speak with about it who was walking a mile in my shoes. And somehow I found this group. It was called TAM, the Addict's Mom. I'm like, where have you been all my life? I requested to join, and they do have to interview you first. They're very careful.
Whom they let into the group.
Yes. And I became all of a sudden instant friends with all these people. I was looking at their stories. I was reading everything, and I'm like, oh my God, that's me. They're dealing with what I'm dealing with. There's different chapters throughout the United States. We have over 100,000 members, and there's a TAM Nevada. I joined TAM Nevada, and at the time, my son was in rehab in California. I joined the TAM California group too, so I could get advice from other mothers who are in California. Each state has different laws, and this helped me connect the different areas. And I saw that there was an event called Lights of Hope, which takes place during National Recovery Month in September every year. And I saw 160 cities from TAM, different states, were doing this event. So being new to TAM, I didn't even really know much about it. I said, who's doing Lights of Hope here in Las Vegas? They said, we're not. I said, well, how do I do it? So I took it and ran with it. That's the program. I'm very passionate about it. I've had help from so many people. I lost my son to an overdose May 14th of this year.
Oh, this is so fresh. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. My phone became an obsession with me, my cell phone. I never slept at night without it being on in full blast by my side. It's the dreaded phone call that we all talked about. Every day when I went into TAM, I saw a mother had lost her child, at least 10 a day in the group. And I thought, not my child, not my child. He's had so many lives. It's not going to be him. He's in recovery right now. He's doing well. And I got the call. No. And I knew that I was never going to stop fighting. I fought for 8 years for my child. I couldn't save his life, but I became more passionate about it because I wanted to be a part of a team, a part of the community that helps change laws, makes new rules. I want to save other kids, and I want to help other mothers. Too many people are suffering in silence. It's 1 in 3 families here affected.
It gives his life more purpose.
Yes.
It's not what anybody would want.
No.
But after the fact, there are so many ways he can live on through you and through your efforts. We're talking with Debi Nadler, the group that you're involved with, TAM Nevada branch.
Yes.
Also in studio with us, Bob Vickrey from WestCare. We're talking about opioid addiction, overdose, the issues surrounding it. And we're also going to fill you in on Overdose Awareness Day, which is coming up at the end of this month. I just want to emphasize, which we always do when we discuss these subjects, opioid addiction, heroin addiction, overdoses, all the deaths, this is a family issue. I want people to realize that because they seem to have a preconceived notion that this is something that it's not. And just like you said, Debi, 1 out of 3 families is affected. I know, Bob Vickrey, your family certainly has been affected. Mm-hmm. And this is what gives you, I'm sure, passion for what you do.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Thank you for having us both, Terry. And Debi, I extend my heart and all of us that work in the community to try to prevent death by overdose, the absolute worst outcome. Our heart is extended to you.
Thank you, Bob.
I often talk in my role with WestCare about the statistics of addiction and mental health, which often co-occurs with addiction. But to hear you tell that story in brief is a suggestion of just how painful and how prevalent the disease extends into the family. I was raised here in Las Vegas. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and God forbid, no member of my family has died from overdose, but we have experienced addiction, and I can imagine my own family trying to work through the process and the pain of a loved one that's in the grips of addiction. And thank you for sharing that. It's so heartfelt. The problem is still here. It's very much part of our community. It affects, as Terry said, the family. It affects the community. It affects our law enforcement. Everything that we in the community try to do to make it healthy, to live here and prosper in Las Vegas, is being taken away by this addiction, primarily opioid. And if you want the statistics, they're pretty easy to find. Nevada is no exception to the national norm. We lose on average approximately one person per day to addiction, and that person has a family and a mother that grieves for the loss of their child. And we have to wrap around it as a community. It's not a singular effort, and it's good to be here today to talk about the problem.
There are so many facets to this issue, too. My brother, who lives back in Kansas, deals with chronic pain. He handles it with opioids, which he manages.
Yes.
But of course, our concern over the overprescribed opioids, which are a big part of the problem, are causing him problems on the other end.
That is
because
correct.
The state back there is arbitrarily cutting him to about 40% of what he was using. Mm-hmm. And so he's dealing with trying to manage that. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking possibly, Bob, that through one of the groups that you are involved with, mm-hmm. they're giving information and advice on mm-hmm. managing pain in other ways.
Yes, absolutely. And just to remark on that, that's a good point, because there is stigma attached to addiction. And now with the national spotlight on opioid, because of the incredible, unbelievable amount of deaths by opioid and by heroin, by fentanyl, carfentanil. There's this national spotlight that shines on this, and the awareness level is sky high now. And there's been a little bit of overreach to the effect that there are those that legitimately need to manage pain through prescribed medication. And there is a place for that in the continuum of care. And I think in the community that we live in, I belong to lots of organizations that come at this many different ways, and it is recognized that there is a legitimate need for prescribed medications. What we want more than anything is to stop death by overdose mm-hmm. and unintentional overdose. That is the key problem that we face in the community today. We have to stop this loss, this generation we're losing through overdose by opioid.
Absolutely. That is the goal. And we do have people approaching it from so many different perspectives. I know, Debi, you're now in touch with Joe Engel with There Is No Hero in Heroin. We've also talked about the Recovery High School, which now exists in CCSD, which is very much needed mm-hmm. and a wonderful addition to mm-hmm. our community. But there are so many ways that people are trying to tackle it mm-hmm. together.
Exactly.
Bob, something that's coming up, Overdose Awareness Day on Thursday the 30th.
That is correct. Thanks for highlighting that, Terry. And this speaks to what we're speaking about. There's many different paths. And one of the nonprofits that I participate in is called the Harm Reduction Alliance. And think about that. It means that not everybody is going to march to the same drum, so to speak. What we need to do in the community, and the Harm Reduction Alliance does this very effectively, is offer many different ways to reduce death, overdose, and harm and disease in our community, all related to addiction. And this particular event is kind of a precursor to what will be International Overdose Awareness Day, which will take place August 31st around the world. And the participation is remarkable. It's a community public health awareness day where we can all take a look at the danger of overdose and the effects. Our event happens on the eve of that, and it will take place at the Chuck Minker Sports Complex, 275 North Mojave Road, August 30th from 6:30 to 8:30. And what does that mean? It means that we bring a coalition of community partners together to help raise the awareness of how we can prevent death and unintentional overdose. And we'll have lots of fun. We'll have raffles, music, lots of speakers there. One of the things that I really love about the event is we always do naloxone training there. because as you well know, Terry, it's available now, and naloxone is a handy item that can prevent death in mere seconds if it's available. It's available to the public now. We train the general public on how to use naloxone effectively, and it can turn a loss of life around in just a moment.
I know, Bob, also, when you were here with us previously, we had Dan Heller in, Chief Pharmacist for Smith's Food and Drug. Dan was educating us on naloxone and how individuals can get that. If there's someone in their family who is dealing with addiction, which we know, Debbie, by talking with you and with you, Bob, that it affects 1 in 3 families. So it's quite common, but it's so important that you have that very, very essential tool in your medicine cabinet. Not only have it, but know how to use it. Dan was telling us how easy it is, even without a prescription, to get a generic dose, actually 2 doses of naloxone. And it's Narcan's, isn't it? A spray?
Yeah, Narcan. Very good point, Terry. When we're talking about this, often we think of addiction in the community as a first responder problem, as a hospital problem, but it's a community problem. And Dan helps spread the message so well that we should have naloxone, right, Narcan, in every home.
Just in case.
Just in case. Because an overdose can happen, as Debbie talked about, in just a matter of seconds in a controlled environment.
Narcan, that's what they used on Demi Lovato, the singer, who experienced an overdose. That had been in the news big time. They used that to revive her. And she's now talking, saying, I'm an addict. I've been really open about it the whole time. And she maintains that recovery is a daily issue. This will never end. You don't go into recovery and go, oh, okay, I've been doing that for a month. I'm good now. It doesn't work that way.
That's a good point, Terry, when you mentioned Demi Lovato. I remember getting a text from my daughter telling me Demi Lovato was in the hospital. I didn't really know who she was, and I looked it up, and I saw that it was an opioid addiction. Several days later, I saw that the family was speaking out. They were denying that she was addicted. And I thought, that's what's going on in our country. That's what's going on in our state. Too many people have blinders on. Too many people will not admit their child is suffering, will not admit they are suffering. It's all stigma. There's such a stigma attached to this that unless people get the word out, spread the word. I've never been silent. When my son first came to me, he was addicted to pain pills. He came crying to me. I didn't keep quiet. I wanted everybody to know, and that's key, awareness and education. That's actually how I found my venue. I'm going to be having a program sponsored by Tam, the Addict's mom, called Lights of Hope. September 16th, New Song Church and Anthem is going to be sponsoring it for me. And what we do is try to bring awareness to the disease itself, stop the suffering in silence, and stop the stigma. And it's an event where we recognize our children afflicted with this disease of addiction, and we light candles. A white candle is for recovering addicts. A red candle is for active addicts. And unfortunately, I will be lighting a black candle this year. Those are for addicts that we've lost. So we're trying to really break the shell here and get more mothers to say, hey, I'm suffering too. We're walking in your shoes, moms. Anybody who wants to join us, look us up. It's addictsmom.com. Reach out. We're willing to help anybody. But back to how strange things happen, I was trying to find a venue, and I was at work. This lady walked in, and she told me she had an appointment with one of my sales reps, and I asked her what company she was with, and she told me she was with New Song Church. And I said to her, oh, how big is your church? She said, very big. I said, who would one speak to about perhaps getting a venue there? Because I knew it needed to be some kind of venue where we could light candles inside anyway. She said, that would be me. What is it about? I told her about Tam. I told her about my son, and she broke down and said, my son is suffering.
Oh, no.
As a matter of fact, he's going before a judge today. And she said, I've never shared this with anybody.
Because of the stigma. And we got to put a stop to that.
So because I met her and told her about it, I got the venue. I met with the pastor of the church, and he told me because of our group, Michelle has opened up. I did ask her permission today before I came here to tell the story. And it seems like now everybody I talk to about it, somebody, their niece, their nephew, their good friend's daughter, their good friend's son, everybody is affected somehow. And like I said, I was the not my child mom. My child made straight A's. My child was in theater. My child had a lot of friends. He was bar mitzvahed. He had an ear for language. He could speak Spanish fluently, Japanese, Hebrew. He traveled. He was so well versed, very intelligent, got mad if he made a B, even an A minus. He was that smart. But you can't stereotype. Addiction does not discriminate.
No.
Open our eyes and realize this. It's not going to get better until we all do that.
Debi, every time we make a connection, it makes our web of help, of caring, wrapping our arms around the community that's affected that much stronger.
That's true.
Bob Vickrey, you have taught me with WestCare so many things about our opioid crisis.
Correct.
Our overdose issues. As I mentioned, there is no hero in heroin. Through that group, I've learned opioids, heroin, works the same way, except heroin is cheaper and more available. So whatever people have gotten in their mind as to what a heroin addict is, it's wrong. It's so much more common. It's people's families, sisters and brothers and parents and kids. And it's making grandparents turn into parents again for their grandchildren because that middle generation has been lost to an overdose.
And that's what I'm seeing on my TAM site. There's a lot of mothers raising their grandchildren right now. Every day I see it, every single day. You cannot put your blinders on, look around you. If you see something, say something. My friends told me, "Oh, I knew your son was on drugs. This was after the fact. Why didn't you tell me?" I didn't know. I knew everybody else was, but not my child.
Sure, not your kid.
I didn't know till he came to me crying. He was addicted to pain pills. And from there, I put him in an intensive outpatient treatment program here, and that's where he got addicted to heroin.
It's so sad because in many cases, an opioid addiction can start with a doctor-prescribed painkiller for instance, a medical procedure where you need a little help to get through that. And it doesn't take long for that addiction to take hold.
You're right, Terry. And I recall when I was here with Dan Heller the last time, and we talked about that narrative, which is exactly correct. We had a prescription over-prescribing problem, unimaginable, especially in the state of Nevada. That led to addiction, and that has led to what we see today. It's no longer over-prescribing. As you mentioned, there's mandates now about doctors reporting and pharmacies reporting. It's called the 365 rule. That will pretty much allow for monitoring doses and prescriptions that are provided. But what we have really today is the narratives about trying to instill hope that folks can find a doorway to get through. As Debi's so poignantly shown us, she was unaware of her son's addiction. He was in a treatment center using heroin.
You should be fine.
Yeah, so-called safe environment. No environment is safe. And what I appreciate about the conversation we're having today is it's a continuum of care. I work for a treatment facility that provides frontline services for people that come in directly from the street that are experiencing all kinds of crisis, mental health and addiction, often combined. We find a way to stabilize. What we need is a continuum of care so that when the person moves on into the community, they have support of family, what other professional support they need, whatever that path may be. I've learned in my recovery, in long-term recovery, there's no one way. There was a time where I thought, if you aren't going to a 12-step meeting and you're not totally sober from the neck up, you're not
doing
sober.
It right.
I couldn't be more wrong.
Everybody's got their own path.
And that limited thinking can kill people. We have to open our minds and our hearts and our imaginations to how we can serve people where they're at. And I think our community in Las Vegas, I attend the PAC Coalition, which is a wonderful organization of nonprofits that come together around the table, many of them treatment providers, and they all agree, we'll find a way if the person can get through our door. We have to get the person through the door. I so appreciate what you said. If you see something, say it. You could save a life out of concern. And I think we're moving in a direction now where that stigma, where there's only one way to not be an addict, is fast going by the wayside. It's how can we serve you? How can we get you the help that you need? How can we keep you safe?
You're here, you've got a problem, we're going to find a way together.
Yes, so important.
Bob Vickrey is with us from WestCare. Also, Debi Nadler with TAM.
The Addict's mom.
Coming up, we've got Overdose Awareness Day, a Las Vegas observation on Thursday the 30th. And Bob, you mentioned Friday the 31st. It's international.
It is. It's unbelievable the momentum that this day is carrying worldwide, which shows us we're not in a vacuum.
Yeah, what a big problem it is.
It's a worldwide problem. Put it on Facebook. Get it out on social media. Friday the 31st, International Overdose Day. Pay attention. Get the word out on it.
Going to be changing my status photo that day. I'll get the logo and we'll all do it.
And actually, I'm on the lights committee in the community we live in for the holiday decorations, and I have presented to the board. I have begged them to put purple lights up in our community that day. I'm still waiting to hear from you, Spanish Trail.
Purple is the color.
And I even told them that I will pay for the lights. Can we just put it up? And I will be taking part in your event on the 30th as well. I'll be passing out bracelets.
I think it's interesting, too, Bob, that you had said about naloxone and the availability of that drug that can arrest heroin overdose in time to save someone. You believe that everybody should have this in their arsenal.
I do. Look at the track record. Unfortunately, people don't go to emergency rooms and overdose. They overdose in their bedrooms. We need our awareness to skyrocket so that as a parent, I know where my child is, what's going on in my home, and if I have the ability to intervene, I know how to do that. And that's what Narcan will do, simply having a dose.
And not only having it, but also knowing how to use it, which I believe instruction is going to be provided during your Overdose Awareness Day on the 30th.
It will be provided. And I might add, Dan Heller, I really respect his work trying to get the word out through Smith's Pharmacy, but also CVS and Walgreens.
Sure.
They will provide instructions, and it's on the shelf, available. And if you have a child in your home, that's what you need as part of your medical arsenal.
I have a kit at home. It comes with two bottles, and the instructions are in there. Very easy to read, very easy to use. I'm going to get more. I'm going to have them in my car. If I see somebody, I'm going to help them, and I have. I've actually called a mom. I was at Walgreens in my area, and a young girl was detoxing. The manager was trying to kick her off the sidewalk, and I stopped my car, and I got out, and I talked to her, and I found out her name and her mother's name, and I called her mom. We have to be proactive in this community. We have to. I've actually stopped and talked to people and asked them how they got here, what their journey was. And I would try to show them that I cared. They don't love themselves.
No.
Everybody around them loves them, and they don't realize it. And they can love everybody else. My son would literally give his last shoe to somebody. That's how he's been his whole life. Friends would come over to his house, and I'd say, Brett, where's your game player? He said, oh, my friend wanted it. I gave it to him. That's the kind of person he was.
Yeah, and you make a good point if I can just jump on that. Services are needed in our community. We can't forget that. WestCare is one facility, which is a nonprofit that provides crisis stabilization. And I'd like everybody to know that there is a facility located at Maryland Parkway in Stewart that will provide crisis stabilization. And for folks that show up to that door, we don't make any inquiries as to what's your age, where did you come from, where do you live, how much money do you have. We want them in the door, and we want to get them assessed very quickly. And quite often that can make the difference between life and death. So I appreciate the opportunity to say that.
One of the things that we do, Debi, as part of Talking Solutions is ask, what can we do to help you?
Make yourself aware. Just look around. And like I said, if you see something, say something. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to question your child. One thing we can do, education is key. We had a DARE program when my kids were, I think, in 4th or 5th grade.
Sure, I remember that.
And all my kids got certificates. They all passed. But that's too young. Kids at that age, they're more mommy, daddy, more homebodies. It's when they reach junior high, middle school is when they become more social. That's where all the little parties are, the school parties, the functions, sports, events. We need education back in the classroom. That is so important. That is one thing I'm trying with the Attorney General's office, trying to get.
That would be so great.
Education. I'll tell you, my sister-in-law asked me to go with her. They were having drug awareness at my niece and nephew's high school here in Vegas. And she said, will you go with me? The speaker is speaking to the moms and dads. I want you to hear what they're talking about. So I went to their school and I sat on the front row, ready to talk and ready to ask questions. And I couldn't believe what he was telling the parents. It was all about e-cigs and e-vapes. Not one word about opioids, the hard drugs, anything. I think the most he said was, and they could possibly get THC into the vapes. And I was raising my hand. I was going to turn around and tell all the parents, 1 out of 3 of you in here, your child will experiment with some kind of opioid at some time. You need to be aware. I didn't know anything about heroin. I would have never, ever imagined everything I have learned in 10 years. And actually, that's part of what TAM does. A couple months ago, a mom said, I found these little pieces of balloon and some foils laying around. And about 100 moms were quick to say, heroin. When I found it in my son's room, I had no clue. I found the pigtails off of balloons and foils wadded up in a ball. I'm like, what is that? And I unfolded it and there was black lines across it. And I Googled it. This was 8 years ago. And I saw heroin. And I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? And also I became like a super sleuth. My son was in IOP at the time. He was just, and I'm saying that not lightly.
Intensive outpatient.
He was on pills.
Yes.
That's how he got in there. And I had a cell phone because I was dropping him off every day, and he didn't think Mom could break into my cell phone, but I paid for it. Possession is 9/10 of the law, and I had his phone. Done. I broke into it, and I found text messages, and one of them was from Rehab Buddy. And I was like, I'm going to see what this says. And sure enough, I started from the beginning. This rehab buddy was telling my son, hey, dude, I have something better for you. It's only $10. I'm like, huh? And my son at first said no. I saw that. But then the kid goes, oh, it's the best. It's the best stuff. And he said some kind of slang word that I never heard before. And that's what got me, by the way, looking in the closet when I read the text messages. And then I saw another text message from Rehab Bud saying, got the urine. This place is so lame. We can pass the test. Got urine. Well, that's when I searched the closet, found the foils, the balloons, saw it was heroin. I went down to the center, showed them the text, and demanded my money back. More and more insurance companies are paying for rehab, but 7-8 years ago, it was impossible. You had to pay. And had I known back then the path that it would have led my son to, I would have done more than demanded my money back. I can tell you that right now. My son wrote in his journals every rehab he went to, he used north, south, east, west. All over. They're getting into rehab centers. There needs to be more regulated centers. There's so many pop-up rehab centers. It's all about the money. Think about our kids. It's about helping our kids that are out there. And another thing, you're asking me what we can do to help. We do have a Good Samaritan law. Most states have it. And you can look up the law online. But part of the law is that I'm trying to get attached to the state of Nevada's Good Samaritan law is the way a lot of these kids overdose and they're not being saved is the other user with them gets frightened. Remember, they're suffering the disease of addiction too. Mm-hmm. The very first thing they do is get frightened and ditch. It could be their best friend. So somebody's OD'd, you're too scared to call the police or do anything, and you run. That's very common. It happens all the time. I know thousands of lives would be saved if we put just one little stipulation in that Good Samaritan law that gives these kids full immunity. Mm-hmm. I thought it was in there, but I spoke with somebody from the district attorney's office, and they told me they can still prosecute.
Yeah, I'd like to interject. I'm not a lawyer, and we deal with the population at risk that you're describing. Just for public consumption, the Good Samaritan law, you're not going to go to jail if you report. I just want to make that clear. If I report an OD, I'm not going to go to jail. I don't want to, the nuances of what you might have on you or not have on you. I certainly can't speak to that. But it's just, as you mentioned, Debbie, if you see it, say it. You can save a life. That is a common story sadly, that a group of people will be together. And all too often now, with the potency of fentanyl, somebody will OD. It's almost a given. Report it. You're not going to go to jail for reporting.
Bob, you know I always ask, as part of Talking Solutions, what can we do to help you?
Listening to the story today speaks to the heart of what we're talking about. We have lots of agencies in Las Vegas that address these problems. It's not the statistics that are going to change. We have enough statistics to overwhelm us, the severity of the problem. In Nevada, fortunately, we have some things that are working for us. This is a Medicaid expansion state. Medicaid will pay for crisis withdrawal. It'll pay for IOP, intensive outpatient and outpatient services. Now, Medicaid doesn't pay for residential services, which is another part of the continuum of care. But you can get somebody in the door and get them treated relatively easy without the barriers of cost, thanks to the politics in the state of Nevada. We have an attorney general that's running for governor that's in recovery.
Laxalt, yes, it mentions in one of his commercials that he had
I've never seen it before,
issues.
ever, in a political commercial. And I think that just speaks to the fact that we can talk openly and honestly about the level and the severity and solutions to addiction and mental health. In Las Vegas, I participate with dozens and dozens of agencies that treat these problems and provide viable solutions. WestCare is but one. We happen to be a nonprofit. And I like to say that because sometimes people that come to our door don't have insurance anymore. They burned every bridge. The families left them. Their friends have left them. They don't have any bridges left. WestCare has always been and will always be that door of hope to this community. And I'm ever grateful that we have the WestCares in the world. It saved my life all those years ago. That doesn't mean it's the only door. Find a solution. If there's a problem and you know it, find a way. Make a call. If it's not to WestCare, then make it to one of the other agencies. We have lots in the community that are willing, ready, and able to help.
We want to make an impact and make a difference in this ongoing problem, which, as we emphasize over and over again, is a family issue. The stigma, we want that gone. We want to shine a light. We want to make our community aware of what a big problem this is. And as you mentioned, Debbie, 1 in 3 families are affected by opioids, the heroin component, which people go, oh, is that the same thing? Yeah, your body thinks it is. So yeah, it is.
Absolutely.
But it's caused immense problems. And we've got to band together to provide the services to everyone affected and their families so that we can turn this around.
Yeah.
The dynamics of the family get totally changed with addiction. Because of my son's passing, my other son and my daughter have come together and they are reaching out. They are helping me. They are actively doing everything that they can to get awareness out as well.
And Bob Vickrey, like you said, it's all about just getting them to the door.
Yes, and often the family will be the way that that person can get there. So I'd agree. It's a family illness. It's a community problem. We have to work together for solutions. If you see something, say something. Be proactive. Help somebody find the door that they need. And then don't let them off the hook. Make sure they follow all the way through. Because coming through the door for crisis stabilization and treatment is just the first step. It's a continuum of care and support that is ongoing, often for a lifetime. But there is hope, and recovery works.
But there's a lifetime to live when you make it through.
Yes, indeedy.
The event Lights of Hope, we are showing there is hope, there can be hope.
So that will be on September 16th.
From 4 to 7 at New Song Church.
That's coming up. Before that, there is Overdose Awareness Day.
It's the kickoff for International Overdose Awareness Day, and we can't forget, for those of us near and dear to this, September is Recovery Month. Lots of things going on. If that's something you're interested in, lots of ways to get involved.
When you start reaching out, you find out how many other people are affected. Be part of Overdose Awareness Day, the Nevada kickoff on Thursday the 30th at the Chuck Minker Sports Complex on Mojave. We will have the links and all the information on the Talking Solutions Facebook page, along with the podcast of our discussion today. Debbie, we will also be sure to include the information on the September 16th event.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
The time goes so fast. We could spend all day talking about this issue, and it's so important to families, and it makes such a difference. It's all about shining a light and removing the stigma. Debi, you reached out to let us know about your issue and your story, which we appreciate so very much.
Thank you.
And Bob Vickrey from WestCare, we always love hearing from you.
Thank you, Terry. It's always a pleasure. And thank you for your good work to promote these life-saving solutions in our community.
Thank you.
That's why we have a show called Talking Solutions. The Overdose Awareness event, Thursday, August 30th.
Correct.
Debi Nadler with TAM and Bob Vickrey with WestCare. Thank you so much for coming in, sharing your stories, and offering information today on Talking Solutions.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you for letting us.
Talking Solutions is a production of the Community Relations Department here at Beasley Media Group Las Vegas. Get more information on today's topic on our Talking Solutions page on Facebook, where you will also find links and a podcast of today's show. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.